Streaming and serving out of Fayetteville, Georgia, you are listening to the New Vision Church podcast, a community to belong, be loved, and believe. Let's check out today's message.
My good friend Randall, we've been friends for 27 years. I've known him. We've worked at camp together. We've also been to Nigeria several times together, and went to Beirut back in 2020, right when COVID hit. I was on the last flight out of Beirut back to the U.S. when, everything was shutting down. I didn't think I was going to get out, which would have been very interesting, but it was a great time to go there and explore even though there was a lot of chaos and everything happening. Of course, things have changed dramatically over the last 5 years there. And so he's back home generating more support and sharing with other congregations what God has been doing in Beirut. And so I want to invite Randall to come up and share a little bit about what God has been doing in his life and through the ministry in Beirut, Lebanon. Come on up, Randall.
Well, it's always great to be back here. I always look forward to coming back every time to see George and to be a part of your church. So I do want to take time to thank you for all the prayers that have come my way. I know George has probably sent prayer updates because I know I've told him about certain things that's happened there to be praying for. But so thank you very much for all of this. It sometimes can be difficult and stressful. But I want to tell you a little bit about my life prior to what took me to Lebanon. I was thinking about it, and I was like, I don't even think I've ever shared how God took me there. And so I was going to share a little bit of my testimony before that. So I grew up in Alabama. I'm a Tide fan. So I grew up there. Get off the stage. And so at the age of 9, I had a huge tragedy to hit our family. I remember one night just a loud boom sound, and I did not know what that was. So I just remember waking up at the age of 9, running through the house, running into the kitchen, and that's where I saw my father crying for the first time in my life. I saw my mother crying. I saw one of my brother's, my brother's wife, not one of them, but my brother's wife crying. And all of this, and I was like, whatever this sound was very bad. I didn't know what it was. All I could remember is that as a kid, I just ducked down like this. And I was beside a stand that held our would have been like a microwave stand. And I just shook. I was just shaking because I knew whatever this noise was had to be the most horrible thing in the world. And that was the night I found out my brother was killed. My brother, I have many brothers, but when he was shot in the chest and in the neck. And the shots at the same time is what woke me up. Now, 4 years after that is when tragedy hit my life again. And so I had a little nephew, so I was 13 at this age. And so 13-year-old kids, we like to just pick on the little ones. And so I had a nephew that was 4 years old, and I was picking on him. And I remember you want to pick on them till you know you got under their skin. So I did. And when I got under his skin, he looked at me, and he screamed. He was like, "I hate you." And I was like, what? It made me mad. I could not believe he said these words to me. And so I looked at him and I screamed back. I said, "I hate you too." And then after that, I just remember, I think I had another fight with a different brother. And then I went to bed. And then my family woke me up and was telling me that my nephew was just killed in a car accident. And so that was probably the hardest day of my life, because the last words I ever told him was that I hated him. And so my mind was, if there is a God, he hates me. He did not love me. And I thought he was punishing me for my words. I felt like my words actually killed my nephew. That because of my words, God took his life as a punishment to me. But I didn't know God. I never been to a church, never went to a church service. My family did not go to church. I never had people in school sharing the gospel with me. I remember Easter would see the movies of Jesus on the TV, and I would think these were just false stories. I didn't know these were like true made-up stories. I thought it was just Hollywood creating a story. And then when you saw him dying on the cross in the movie, you didn't realize this was for people's sins. So I had no clue of who Jesus was at all. And so then I grew up through high school, and I never spoke about any of this to my family, to any friends. And I just always, I became very, I wouldn't hardly talk to people. And it was all because of the hurt I had inside. And so then I kind of buried myself in basketball. I started playing basketball at an early age, and I just buried myself in basketball. Always practicing, always doing stuff in the summers, shooting. My father would want to take us hunting or fishing, and I would go play basketball. And so I did none of this but basketball. And then when I got out of high school, I'm thinking, when I go to college, I want to become a teacher and coach basketball. So while I was in college, I dropped out after about a year and a half. I couldn't handle the pressure of being away from family. I kind of went through like a depression. And so I dropped out of school. And then I started taking acting. I'm like, if I become an actor, I don't have to be me. I can be somebody I like. I can be whatever I want. In this movie, I could be a cop. In this movie, I could fly airplanes. Any of these. I've always loved watching movies. So I'm like, I could be anything except for me. And so I started acting, went to an acting school. Then I buried myself in acting instead of basketball. And so for 7 years, I am acting. And so my life, I've tried to bury everything in the past from my story. I've never talked about my brother and how that made me so afraid of the dark. I would literally run full speed at night to go. I lived in the country. So I would run from house to house full speed, and I would run in zigzags because my mind was there's going to be somebody behind a tree with a gun waiting to shoot me. And so I would run zigzags because it's harder to hit a zigzagging target. And I would run full speed. And so I had this huge fear of death. And I tried to bury all of this from childhood up until all my life. Until at the age of 26, and I remember I went into audition for a show, and I sat down, and I'm just waiting for my audition. Well, this guy came up and sat beside me. Well, he started telling me about his life. And then as he's telling me about his life, he was telling me about how he was driving one day, and he made a left-hand turn. When he made the left-hand turn, another car T-boned him. And then in the passenger seat of his car was his girlfriend. And it killed his girlfriend. And so what hit me is that the play I had done previous to this one, this girl was in my show. And we had a scene together, and we kind of became friends. And as he's sitting beside me, I'm like, this is her boyfriend. This is the guy that turned and had the car accident that killed my friend. And so as I'm sitting there listening to him tell me the story, something different was about his life and how he handled the tragedy compared to me. I just buried myself. And so we became really good friends. And he introduced me to Chick-fil-A. I'd never been to Chick-fil-A. Growing up in the country, we'd go there. I'd drink sweet tea, fell in love with the tea. Then we both ended up with a role in the play. We started hanging out, and he would ask me, hey, man, would you go with me? I would like to go to her grave. And so I was like, yes. And so I became an outlet for him to share his stories to about her. And from her funeral, 250 high school kids from her school gave their life to Christ by the way she lived for Jesus. And in her death, 250 people. As I'm sitting there at the graveside with him, he's telling me all these stories about what she wanted to do when they would go on dates. She didn't want to go on a normal date. She wanted to go on a date where they go buy canned food and they take it out and give it to people in need. That was her idea of going on a date with him. And so as I sit there and I listen to these stories and I'd leave and I'd go home, I would find myself just weeping uncontrollable because all the feelings I tried to bury from my childhood up were coming back. But it was much stronger. I mean, it felt like it was the sadness I had as a kid times 100. I would pull over at the grave of my nephew and my brother. They were buried beside each other. And when I would see his picture, I just couldn't control from crying because I knew my sin. I knew my sin. And then as I kept hanging out with my friend and kept going to Chick-fil-A, I saw something. I was like, what is different about him? Then one day he invited me to church. So I went to church. And as I went to church, I understood nothing. The guy spoke with words I didn't even know when he was just in his sermons. But I kept going. And I never understood anything. But I kept going to Chick-fil-A. I ate there every single night. Even after my show was over, I became friends with the workers. And 2 of the workers were in our show. So I kept going there. Every night for 9 months, except for on Sunday, I ate at Chick-fil-A. I remember 2 nights that I went out to eat with other friends. But other than those 2 nights, I ate at Chick-fil-A every single night. So one night I'm driving back home. I had moved to that city now. And it's amazing how God orchestrated all this. And I go to Chick-fil-A, but I'm feeling really bad. Like I was telling you, all these emotions were coming back that I've tried to bury. And this waitress, she looked at me. She could tell I was feeling bad. I said, yeah, it's just not a good day. Which is weird for me because everybody always saw me as happy and all this stuff, right? And then this lady, she was like, has anybody ever told you about Jesus? And I said, no. I'd never heard of him. Never knew the story. And so then she started telling me about Jesus and how God loved me. And this is completely different than what I ever thought of God. I just broke down crying, just crying uncontrollably as she told me about Jesus and how he died for my sins and how God loved me. But then I was like, I hope she leaves. I don't want people to see me crying. So she'd go away and have to do her work because she was a waitress. And then all of a sudden I get myself together and I'm like, oof. And then she'd come back. Then I start crying all over again. But that was the night my life changed. My life completely changed that night. I went from thinking God hated me to knowing that God loved me and God died for my sin. And I knew my sin. I mean, I had many sins, but there was the one sin that just broke me. And that was my nephew. And then after a while, I remember asking my friend that I'd go sit at the cemetery with. I was like, do you think my nephew forgives me? And he was like, he became the first person I ever told. Nobody ever heard about my life and how my brother or my nephew from the ages of 9 until I was 26 years of age. He became the very first person I ever talked about it to. And I said, do you think my nephew forgives me? He's like, don't you know there's no unforgiveness in heaven? And oh my goodness, the freedom I felt. That God loved me, I felt free. That my sins were forgiven, I felt free. That there's no unforgiveness in heaven, I felt free. God eventually started working in me to where many of my fears were gone. Like the fear of darkness, the fear of death. I remember growing up as a teenager, the sign of war. You remember the war that was in Kuwait? They call it Desert Storm. I would literally pace up and down our country roads shaking, thinking this was going to be the war where I die or my family would die. I would literally shake. And now to think that God put me into a country where there is war, it baffles my mind. What was he preparing me for? And so I ended up in 1999, I went to a conference. And I heard a guy named John Piper speaking at this conference. And he spoke on Habakkuk 3:17 through 19. And when he spoke on Habakkuk 3, it was like talking about, though there are no olive on the tree, there are no cattle in the stall. So it's like anything there was nothing for this guy. Meat is your source of food, was their source. Olives were their source of food. There were no fruit on the vines, their source of food. Everything was gone. And then he said, yet I will rejoice in the Lord. I will joy in the God of my salvation. And then John Piper went from there, and he looked at all of these college students, but I didn't feel like he was looking at them, but I felt like he was looking at me. But he says, though I don't pass this test, though I don't do this, and he put it on a level to where it related to us, yet I will rejoice in the Lord. I will joy in the God of my salvation. And I was sitting there like, man, though all this bad stuff has happened in my life, yet I will rejoice in the Lord. And then John Piper went from there, and he started speaking and telling stories about different missionaries that had given their life for the Lord. You got Adoniram Judson, Hudson Taylor. You got all of these great people. The Bible written in English. Did you know he was killed for this? Because he started translating the Bible into English. He was almost finished. I remember one story that I've read, and it was talking about a missionary man that was put in prison, right? He's imprisoned. And then they put another young Christian guy in prison, and they are going to be executed. So the young guy, he goes to the older guy. He's like, do you think I can do this? That I can endure this? All he had to do was denounce Christ. All he had to say was he didn't believe in Christ anymore. And the older guy looked at him and says, don't worry. Tonight we will be feasting in the presence of Christ. And they both endured being burned at the stake. Many people endured being burned at the stake and were singing praises to God as flesh fell off their bodies. And people could see the bones just hanging on their hands, hanging up with just bones as flesh is falling from their body. Yet I will rejoice in the Lord. I will joy in the God of my salvation. And if we go to current times, back in Libya, where the Egyptian Christians were martyred, not only Egyptians, but they were all put on the beach. There's like 21 of them, I think. And they were told, deny Christ and you will live. And none of them would. And they executed them. Cut off their heads, one by one. This is recent. Even in Lebanon, where I'm at now. But at this conference, God called me to the foreign mission field. This was 1999. So then I'm like, okay, Lord, I want you to prepare me for the mission field. So I ended up serving as a youth minister at a mission church in America. And it was in a trailer park. And so as I'm serving there, I think George even came to visit there as well, right? Swan Lake? Yeah. He came and brought a sign group there a couple of times. And so as I'm serving there, you hear some of the most crazy prayer requests from kids. One kid was like, please pray for my friend. Her house is full of roaches. Please pray for my duck. He died. The next week she come, please pray for my dog. He died. Then, please pray for my father. He's in prison. Please pray for my mother. She's in jail. Most of their parents never came to church. Only the kids. So every week we had a massive children's ministry. I thought I was going to be more of a youth minister, but it turns out I was more of a children's minister because they all flocked to the church. And we would feed them. That could be the only meal they had for Sunday. We would give them little snacks, and then they would be going home. And so I served there. But while I'm doing the youth ministry, we had maybe 5 youth, and 2 of them became like sons to me. Ishmael and Emmanuel. Great names, right? And so I remember when one of the guys invited them to the church. I was taking the youth to a concert, right? And so they invited Ishmael and Emmanuel to come. And so the next day, Emmanuel would call me. And I'm like, so I answer the phone. And I talked to him. Well, then the next day, he called again. And the next day, he called again. And I'm sitting there like, why does this kid call me? He doesn't normally come to church, but I'm like, he's calling me every day. I was like, why does this kid keep calling me? Then the next day, he called again. Then he would go out on wrestling trips, like 2 hours away. He would call me from there. And he would sit and talk to me for like 1 hour, 2 hours. And then God changed me. He was like, these kids don't have a father. And they need something stable in their life. So God told me, he says, you will not go on the mission field until they're out of high school. And so I put going on the mission field on hold. And then I stayed the youth minister and discipling these guys until they were out of high school and a little beyond. Emmanuel was in college. Ishmael was in college, but he had dropped out and he got married. So during this time, I'm reading a book called Radical. And when I was reading Radical, this is 13 years later, God said, okay, now's the time for you to go. And so I'm like, okay, now I need to start preparing myself to go overseas. These guys were taken care of. So I ended up going through a training, and I moved to Texas. I lived in Texas for a year, in Austin, Texas. Loved it. First, I was kind of angry. They requested for me to move. They wanted me to move away from friends and family to go through my training to help prepare me for when I was living overseas. But I was like, I only have a year left before I leave, and they're making me leave my family and friends. I was very angry. But then when I get to Austin, I loved it. I made friends from Morocco. I knew I was going to be moving to Muslim country. God had called me to unreached peoples, and I knew that's where I was going to move. And so part of my training was to get to know the Muslims in the area and start living as a missionary while I was in Austin. So most of all of my friends were from Morocco. And I remember my first friend I made, he worked in a gas station. So I would go to the gas station every night. I'd hang out till 1, 2 in the morning because he worked third shift. And you know what was great about this? He could not leave. We could sit there and start talking about the Bible, and he could not leave. He had to stay and work. And we would talk, and I would share the gospel with him. And then the whole gas station was Muslims. They all came in and worked there, even though I don't think it was owned by a Muslim, but they all worked there. So the morning shift, I got to know all of them. And then I got to go to another gas station, got to know other ones. Then I went to a little, it was called Zaytuna, but it's like a hookah lounge. People would go and smoke argili. And in Morocco, they play a French game called pétanque. I learned how to play pétanque and started playing with these guys, and we would share the gospel. And I was talking with Chosi earlier, and I was telling actually a story from this time when I lived there, but he didn't know it was from Texas. But one time I was sharing the gospel with one of the Moroccan guys, and he looked at me, he says, "We love Jesus more than you." And I said, "What?" I said, "There's no way." I said, "We look at Jesus. Jesus is God, and Jesus died for our sins. How could you love Jesus more than us? They don't know what it's like to be redeemed. They hope that when they die, that God may have mercy on them. May have. There's never an assurance of salvation. We have assurance. We have it completely and totally, assurance that we are saved." And so I'm like, there's no way you can love Jesus more than us. And so this was really great practice for me. And then I end up moving to the United Arab Emirates. That's where God finally sent me. The United Arab Emirates is considered 100% Muslim, the Emirati people. But I don't know if you've ever been. I did not live in Dubai. I lived outside Dubai. But it's a big city that's a melting pot of all countries. So you can really reach the nations in that one country. The Emiratis made up 17% at the time when I was there, of their country. 17%. Can you imagine? The majority were from India. then you had Pakistan, Bangladesh, the Philippines, and then it would be Westerners, and then Emiratis. They were a very small percentage of their country. And so I lived there 2 years. You cannot go there as a missionary, so you have to go as like a job kind of thing. And so I went with the hopes of opening a CrossFit gym. And so I had been doing CrossFit here in America, and I loved it. And I saw how it developed community. And I was like, this would be great overseas. And so I did. For 2 years, I lived there, and we had such a great community. But I did notice that things started changing while I was there. Somebody told me I was being investigated, and then I had a friend that my closest friend, he told me that his dad had threatened to have me arrested, even though his dad never met me. But because I helped his son. All my friends turned out to be mostly Emirati people. And so Emiratis, they're very particular about Emiratis. If my friends had been people from Bangladesh, they would just not care. Or if my friends had been from Pakistan, they would not care. But because they were Emiratis, yeah, his dad threatened to have me arrested because I helped him. His car had broke down, and I helped him repair his car. And his dad told him, don't you know it's shameful for you to let him do this? A Christian from America, to help him. It was shameful for him as a Muslim. Their country is based on honor, shame. And if you do something to shame the family, that's considered very bad. And so he threatened to have me arrested. And then the CrossFit gym I was doing, they tried to shut me down. And they said that I needed to show proof that I was a certified CrossFit trainer. So I went down to the little local government where I was training, and I showed them my certificate where I was able to coach CrossFit. And so then they let me start training again. Then the next thing I know, they come back and said that we couldn't train because we're dragging tires across the yard. And I'm like, okay, we can change this. And so we started dragging them on the sidewalk, because they didn't want to ruin the grass. So we were making the changes anytime they said something. And then they shut me down again. And I was like, what is happening? And when they shut me down again, my Emirati friends, there's a radio station they can call to share what they're mad about, their problems. And so when they call and share their problem, everybody in the Emirates wants to know about their problems. And the sheikhs, which are the rulers, have put people to answer these questions. So it kind of goes over the local government's head. These are people directly connected to the sheikh. Okay, so they call this radio station. And now, like, as a missionary, you try to stay under the radar, right? Especially since they don't allow missionaries. Well, all of a sudden, I did not know my friends were going to do this. They call, and this CrossFit becomes national news. And the people that the sheikh have answered, why are they closing y'all down? We don't see a reason for this. Well, then the little local government calls the radio station. So then it becomes a battle on the radio station, and the little local government told many lies. It was really crazy. They're not allowing people to use the area. No, we allow anybody. Actually, most of the people walking by want to join us in the workouts. And so it was just very, very crazy. So when all this stuff started happening, I had to drive across the border to Oman like every month to renew my visa. So I was like, okay, something's changing. So I need to carry extra money in case they don't allow me back in. And so I did. I started carrying extra money, but they allowed me back in. And so, but they did make me pull over one time, and they scanned my eyes and all this stuff. And then I come on in. And then a few days later, I get a phone call. So I had to go to criminal investigation, which is like CIA. So I ended up driving to the criminal investigation. There they interrogated me for about an hour and a half. They put me in a car, drove me across town, and different people did like an interrogation with me for another hour and a half. And then, but me as a missionary, I had to be careful, right? Because there's other people there. And so I can't give away all the people. So I had to be very specific. I knew I had to cooperate, and because my idea is I want to stay in the country. I'm trying to keep myself in the country because I've grown to love my friends. We have a great relationship. I love sharing the gospel with them. And so after they get through questioning me, they finally look at me and says, okay, you have 10 days, sell everything you have, get rid of your belongings, and you get out of the country. And this was heartbreaking for me. 10 days to leave the country. So I did. I had to get rid of my stuff. And it was a blessing to get rid of it. I was able to give it to different church people, like some from areas that really couldn't afford nothing. But I learned how to shop cheap. I found the cheapest places to go, even cheaper than Goodwill, when I was there. And so I could go buy all my things were there. So it was a blessing just to give it to other church people. And so I ended up back in America after I was kicked out of the country. I kind of went through a depression. I didn't know where I belonged anymore. I felt very weird. I'm like, God, you've called me to foreign missions. And I was like, where do I go? And I kept looking and looking. And I was looking at Kuwait, Bahrain, Qatar, even England, because I knew my Emirati friends would travel there. I kept looking for places to where I could still have connections with them. And then 4 years, I'm back there. And in the year 3, I saw where one of the guys from a church in Dubai was going to be in Nashville. And I was like, oh, this will be great. I can go connect with him, right? I can connect with him and feel close back to the Emirates again. And so I did. And I drove 3.5 hours, went to Nashville, sat and had dinner with him. And then I was not expecting. I thought we was just going to talk about the Emirates. He says, hey, I'm about to plant a church in Beirut. Would you like to move with me? And I was like, whoa, this could be an awesome opportunity. Then I was like, well, I didn't want to accept it until I prayed. I said, let me pray about this. So, it's on here. Now is it? Oh, gotcha. Okay. So I was like, let me pray about Beirut. And so I went home and started praying. Well, then, in the first week that I'm back home, the Emirates banned their people from going to Lebanon. And I'm like, well, Lebanon is out of the question. I'm not looking for that. I'm looking for somewhere where I can be near my friends. So I keep praying about the other countries that I was telling you about earlier. And I sat and pray. And then I was like, one day I get the idea. I'm going to go visit all my friends so I can still feel connected to the mission field in Texas, where I went through mission training. Some of my friends had came back to Texas, so I went. And I went back to the church I attended. They were doing a message on Jonah and all this stuff, which was amazing. And I kept hanging out with my friends. And I loved it. I felt so connected. From Rome, Georgia, I was like the only person from my church to ever be on the mission field. So I felt completely lost. When I went back, I felt like I had no connection to serving the Lord overseas with anybody. And so it was really difficult for me because I didn't feel like I belonged anymore in America at this time. And so when I went back to Texas just to try to feel reconnected, I loved it. I loved being connected. My friend was in Libya. He had came home because while I was living in Dubai, well, the Emirates, not Dubai, I lived in Fujairah. While I was living in Fujairah, there was a missionary from the church in Texas that I was attending got killed in Libya. He was out running in the morning and he was shot down. And so they pulled out the whole team. And so I knew some of the members from this team. My friends were on the team because we all attended the same church while I was in Texas. And so I really wanted to be reconnected. And so I did that, went back home, but I really remembered the sermon series of Jonah. And so I'm like, I'm going to continue listening to that church's series on Jonah while I'm living in Georgia. The second week, so it's the third sermon. I listened to the first one in Texas, then another week, and then the third week I'm back in Georgia, and I listened to the sermon, and I was like, what is this? And as a pastor was speaking, he was like, giving the story of Jonah, how Jonah was following his heart and not the heart of God. His heart was to go away from Nineveh. God's heart was for him to go into Nineveh. Jonah's heart did not want to see the people of Nineveh repent. Me, I could not care less about the people of Lebanon. I wanted to be near my Emirati friends. And then God was like, I took you away from that country so I could put you somewhere else. And I was like, I will not be Jonah. And so immediately, a year later, I picked up my phone that night and I messaged the guy in Beirut. And I only met him that one time. And I messaged him. It says, God has showed me that I'm coming to Beirut. And so I started preparing. I went to Beirut. Didn't know what to expect when I got there. I had maybe 3 months of what felt like a normal life. And I remember my first 2 weeks, I stayed in like a hostel type area where I had to share a room with somebody. The next 5 weeks, my pastor had went back to America, so he let me stay in his apartment for 5 weeks. Then the next 4 weeks, another missionary had went to America, so I moved from the pastor's house into her house and stayed there for 4 weeks. So I'm like, it's getting close to her to be back. I need an apartment. But when I was in the pastor's house, I met a friend. He was from Syria. And it was really funny. He could not talk English. I could not talk Arabic. I learned a few Arabic words, and I studied a little bit. I still need to get much better. And so we became friends. We'd sit there with Google. I type it into my phone, hand him my phone. He'd type it into his. We'd have to go from Arabic to English. And I made a great friend. And so I don't know if you've ever seen pictures of Beirut. I'll show you one in a minute. Actually, let me see. Give you an idea of Lebanon. So a lot of people think Lebanon is a desert. And Lebanon is actually just above Israel, as you can see. So for me to drive from Beirut to Israel would take me about 2 hours. And I live up in the middle of Lebanon. You can see the star up here is me. And the border would be down here. And if you want to know, Chosy grew up here in the West Bank. So we would have been pretty close to being neighbors. So he grew up there. And so here I am living in Beirut. And so it's not a desert. It's a massive city. I will show you. This is Beirut. This is an area I go to often. It's not too far from my house. This is called Rausha. At first I used to think they were saying like Russia, but it's Rausha. And so you can see all the massive buildings. People don't live in like little houses there. Mostly everything is a tall building that you live in. Maybe the smallest will be one floor would be the smallest. There is some houses, but not all. But it's always buildings that live up 6 floors or more. So yeah, the city just goes up, up, and up. And so Abed, where I met him, was close to Rashi. I used to walk from his place to Rashi. But I ended up in a Armenian area. There's an area called Burj Hamud, and it's an Armenian refugee area. So I don't know if you know much about Armenia, but Armenia, some of the land was overtaken by Turkey. And the people that lived on that side were forced out, and they ended up in Lebanon, right? So I'm living with them, and I loved it. But my friend Abed was over an hour walk for me to get to. I was still kind of new, so I didn't know how to take taxis, and taxis there. Beirut is a very corrupt place. As a tourist, they try to overcharge you for everything. And so I didn't trust people. I didn't know the bus system yet. So I literally walked over an hour to hang out with Abed. I would hang out with him till 2 in the morning. And so after 3 weeks, chaos broke out. I remember sitting with Abed, at about midnight is when it went crazy. I started noticing scooters doing the craziest things on the street. Stopping cars, making cars turn around. They're blocking off the area. And I was like, what's happening? None of us knew what was happening. And then it got worse. So about 2, and I was like, I think I might need to go home. But by that time, it was too late. I had no idea how to get back home. I was trying to go the way I normally went, but these scooter people, I did not trust them. I was like, did America do something? You just don't understand the impact America has on the world until you live outside of America. Has a huge impact. Like people in Lebanon, some people hate America. And America, some of the decisions that are made here can impact Lebanon to where it causes chaos. But I didn't know what happened. My mind was, did America do something to start this? Because where I was at was in a Muslim area. And I knew that. And I'm like, how do I get home? All I knew how to do was walk. So I started walking. And then I started seeing fires where they turn over the dumpsters. They set the streets on fire. And I was like, what is going on? And I was like, if America done something, I remember messaging my church from Rome, Georgia. I was like, y'all please pray for me. I said, I don't know what's happening, but the people here are setting the streets on fire. The scooters are, and every time I see a scooter, I would hide behind a car because I'm like, if America's done something, I totally look American. I do not look Lebanese or Arab or any of these at all. And so even most of my friends from America, they're like, you look the most American of all of us. And I'm like, I hid. I'd hide behind cars. And I'm like so scared, like kind of scared, like I don't know what's going on. I make it towards downtown. I tried to avoid downtown because all I could see was smoke. I could see the smoke just coming up. And I'm like, oh my goodness. And so I started going through a different area. Well, I ended up in an area that was so bad that I was like, I got to get out of here because I don't even know where I'm going anymore. So, and I didn't know my way around. I'm only there 3 months. And I don't know the roads very well. So then I just like, okay, I'm going downtown. I don't know what's happening downtown, but I know I cannot get home unless I go downtown. So I go downtown and I see smoke, people, the scooter people are crazy, and I try to walk around and hide my best way. And then when I finally get on the road that goes to where I live, I see these people. They're just walking normal, just hanging out, laughing. I'm like, what is going on? Don't they know what's happening? And they did. They knew exactly what was happening. And they could tell I was scared. And they're like, they wanted to know what I saw. They were so excited. What'd you see? What'd you see? And I'm like, man, the Le Gray was on fire, which is a nice hotel downtown. And they're like, oh, yeah. And I'm like, what is this? And they're like, well, you have nothing to worry about. You're like, because I literally thought I was scared. And after they said that, I felt much better. I just walked home. But it was over an app on the phone. The people there, you should feel very fortunate that we have the phone service we have here. But there they don't have this phone service. So we use WhatsApp for messaging. And so when you have a country that is considered very corrupt, taking the money from the people, and then when they said, every day we're going to charge you to use WhatsApp. The people broke instantly. And that's when all the chaos went. And then it started a revolution. I don't know if y'all heard the news back here about the revolution that happened in Beirut, but it was insane. I mean, I've got many hundreds of pictures on my phone. I even attended some of them because the curiosity got the best of me. I wanted to see what it was like. One time, I got to the point where I didn't care to see as much what it was like anymore, but I ran into an American. I started volunteering at a bookstore, so I was trying to get to the bookstore. Well, the road was blocked, and I was like, the taxi driver's like, okay, you got to get out here. He dropped me off right in the middle of the protest, and I'm like, what do I do? And I saw police, so I said, how do I get to Hamra is where I was trying to go. He said, well, go up there and cut to that way. Well, I kind of knew that area. I was like, I'll try it. And so I started walking up that area. And this is more of an extreme Muslim area. I knew this. But so when I started walking up that area, and I took a right to go towards Hamra, I seen somebody grab like a 2x4 and started smashing the window of a taxi. And I just turned around. I'm not going that way. And I messaged the people at the bookstore. I said, I will not be coming today. And I just walked straight back to the Armenian area. The Armenian area is safe, pretty safe, because they're not so much involved in all the stuff that happens in Lebanon. So I just walked back. I stayed in my area, and I just hung out there. And you'd be amazed. You could have fires, protests on one street, people dining, eating on the next, enjoying their life. And then you kind of get used to it. You kind of get used to it. And so I did. Like during the war, like after the revolution, things calmed down. I'll tell you what calmed the revolution down: COVID. COVID stopped everything. After COVID, many people would schedule very few revolutions, protesting the government. And to be honest, I don't think it ever really helped. And so after about, let's say, 2 years, I'm trying to find a job working at schools to teach. I wanted to teach Bible or English at schools. They got Christian schools, but the majority of the students would be Muslim. And I got a job, and I went 3 days, and COVID came and shut the whole school down. I remember when George came. He had 1 day. I took George here, actually. You remember the Starbucks I took you to? These rocks were the Starbucks is the buildings that you see hanging off the edge. And you have the most amazing view from Starbucks there. And then the next day, George was barricaded in Burj Hamid. And my apartment that George stayed in, I would go like this: 1, 2, 3.5 step. That's the whole width of my apartment. And then to go to the back of my apartment, 1, 2, 3.5 steps. That was a square of my apartment, from front to back. My bathroom was in there, my bed, everything was in this room. And I built a balcony. George had to sleep on the balcony. I had put my bed on top of the bathroom. The ceiling was like maybe 12 foot high. 12 foot high ceiling. So on top of the bathroom was about 7 foot. So I put my mattress on there. I built a little wall and to keep me from falling off in the floor. It was the size of a single wide. The whole bathroom was the size of a single wide mattress. Actually a little bit smaller than a single wide mattress. And so, George got to sleep on the little balcony I made. And I had made like a mesh bookshelf of like out of scrap pieces of wood that I found. I built everything out of wooden pallets. It's a really cool place. I actually loved it. But when COVID hit and I couldn't walk, I'm like, I could take 1 step, I'm in the bathroom. 1 step, I'm at the kitchen sink. 1 step, I'm out the door. And I'm like, I couldn't walk. But they allowed you to walk by going to the grocery store. So I'm like, okay, every day I'm going to put on my backpack. They'll think I'm going grocery shopping. And I would go out walking every day. I found hidden beaches to where nobody could see me. I would go walk to these beaches. I had a great time during COVID. If I wanted to meet my friends, we'd say, hey, I'm going to Spinny's, which is like a supermarket. I'm going to Spinny's at so-and-so time. You should come here too. And we'd all meet up at supermarkets sometimes just to hang out so we could see each other. And so you do what you got to do. And so, and then during this time, my father passed away actually my mentor passed away first within a few months of me being in Lebanon, which he became like my spiritual dad for me, because when I first became a believer, there was no Christians in my family. And so that was very difficult to hear of him just passing away. Then my father passed away while I was there. My last time to talk to my dad was over video, saying bye to him. Then while I'm at home for my father's funeral and stuff, my sister gets COVID. So I ended up staying a little bit later taking care of her. And then I ended up going back. Well, while I was gone, my sister never ate another meal while I was back in Beirut. So within like the next about a year after my father, I came home for my sister's funeral. And then after that, I come home. Actually, it wasn't even a year for my sister's funeral. Then a year after that, I come home for my brother's funeral. And he had gotten COVID and developed bleeds in his lungs. And then while I'm home for my brother's funeral is when I'm sitting at home taking care of my mom. And my mom passed away while I'm at home for my brother's funeral. And so then I went back to Lebanon, and I have not been back for almost 3 years. Because it was very hard to come back this time for me. Because it was the first time coming back without my mom. And so I still haven't been to Alabama yet to see my sisters and my brothers, or sisters that live there. But God has still been so gracious. He's been so gracious to me. He's blessed me with a great church. And this is the church that I serve the Lord in Lebanon. It's called City Bible Church. We did not always meet there. In 2000, there was an explosion. I don't know if you, or 2002, there was it was one, I think. Yeah. My brain. 2021. There was the Beirut port explosion. I don't know if y'all remember that. And so that actually blew up part of our church. We were within a quarter of a mile. The explosion reached a distance of over 10 miles. Windows were knocked out. My apartment was within less than a mile of the church, or less than a mile of the explosion. I had gotten an apartment. I'd moved from the little apartment because when the economy crashed, I paid $250 for the small apartment. That was the cheapest I could find at the time. And then, because of the economy crashing, I ended up getting a big apartment for $250. And I'm like, I can walk. And it was nice. And it was the 5th floor. I lived on the 5th floor, no elevator. Most people don't want to live on the 5th floor where there's no elevator. But I was like, it's okay. I like exercise. And so I climbed it every day, and I ended up with a good view. Because for me to get to my apartment from the lower level floor of ground, like to go to church, I had to climb five stories to get to my road of stairs, which was 99 stairs. Then another 5 floors to get to my apartment, which was 94 stairs. So I'm climbing 193 stairs just to get to my apartment daily. But I had a great view because I'm up this big old hill, right? And so my view was the port. So my apartment was destroyed as well. It blew up my doors. It blew up all the windows. But this is where God was so gracious and faithful. During the time my father passed away, God took me out of the country, right? To get me out of the country. And then my plane tickets were that I should have arrived back in Beirut on August the 3rd. August the 3rd. But Turkey canceled my flights. So about another month later is when I finally got to go back to Beirut. But because Turkey canceled my flights, I was not in my apartment when it got blew up. I was still in America. God, if you had seen my apartment when I got back, I wanted to go see it. My friends had been there to clean it up, and it was so funny. They cleaned up my apartment, took my stuff out. People went in. I had no doors. People were coming into my apartment, taking some of my things. So a girl from my church organized a group. They went to my apartment, cleaned out everything. She put every bit of my stuff in her apartment. I could not believe that she did that for me. Every bit of my stuff went to her apartment. Very nice. That's why I was telling you, I have a great church. And so then I ended up having to move again, but I wanted to see what my apartment looked like. So when I get back, I walked up there. They kind of patched it up. The doors that they just pieced back the broken doors. There, you can see the break in the door, and they put it back on there. I still had no windows or anything, but when I opened, I could see it looked like it had never been cleaned. I was like, what's happened? Well, the landlord decided he's trying to get NGOs to help rebuild his apartment, so he don't want them to come in and looking at a clean apartment. He had his person to go in, throw all the stuff back out everywhere, And I'm like, it was the craziest thing. But you could see blue marks all over my wall. The blue marks were my doors. The doors are this thick wood, solid. If I had been in my apartment, I probably would have been killed, easily killed. Many people were killed in my area, in their apartments. I met one guy, he said a piece of glass hit his brother and killed him. Some people, the aluminum from the window things hit them and they killed them, hit them in the head, killed them. On my way here, I had a layover in Paris, and I was thankful. I had a 21-hour layover. I'm like, I can get out and see some of Paris. I was like, this is great, because I always look for the cheapest flights. And so my cheapest flight was a 21-hour layover in Paris. So I got out. But on my way to Paris, I'm sitting, out of all the seats on the plane, I'm almost in the very back of the plane, right? And a guy sitting beside me. And then on the other side of him was a Mormon missionary. So I'm sitting there listening to them talk. I could see the little black badge on his thing. And he just finished his mission, so he's heading back home. And so I'm sitting there overhearing their conversation. And I hear him say he's from Lebanon, in Beirut. And I'm like, that's weird. So I asked him, I said, where in Beirut are you from? And he told me where he was from. And I was like, it's not far from me at all. It's very close. And actually now he said he moved from that apartment and he's living right beside the place where I go buy my groceries. And I was like, that is so weird. Out of all the people in this world to sit on the plane, not even from Lebanon, the plane was not from, is from Paris to America. I wasn't even on a direct flight. I stayed in Paris one whole night because of my layover. And then when he told me where he lived, I said, oh yeah, I remember this area, because I said that's where there was a teenage boy that was killed in the explosion, and his pictures were hanging everywhere. He was, I think, 16 years of age. Beautiful kid. He said, yeah, that was my son. And I was like, wow. Out of all the people that sat beside me, it was this guy. And then for me to bring up the boy, it was his son. So this is the way I was saying God has been gracious, and see how God is moving. And so as I've been living there, serving this church, this is our church congregation. When we started looking for a church after our church got blew up, we were looking for a church, and I was walking around and I saw this building. So I made a video of it. There was no roof. It was completely, all you see is sky. And so they set up a time to go meet with these people. And this is what the Lord has helped us to do. From a lot of the money that was given to us to rebuild our old church, which we did, but there was a lot of extra money left over from that. They took, and because we needed to move, because our church was growing, we moved into this, and they were able to use that money to build this. Well, the church was already built. We put a roof over it, changed it, made it much more to where people could actually come. And our church is very similar to y'all. It's very diverse in people. We have people from all over the world there. I have friends from Africa, the Philippines, Iraq, England, France. They're just everywhere. Probably over 10 nationalities are come to this church. Over 10. And this, don't it give you a great picture of heaven? Every tribe, every tongue, every nation. To me, it gives me a great picture. And so, after not having my job of teaching anymore, I am now on staff at this church. I serve this church. They have made me a deacon of the church. And so I have different ministries that I do at this church. And this is one of the things that we did was an event for kids. And these kids came. These kids are all from Syria. I just see Aham, Amen, Muhammad, and I can't remember the other one's name at the moment. But 1, 2, 3 of them are brothers, and one is a cousin. And the older one is Peter. Peter is a really good friend of mine. Peter is actually a Maronite Christian. So Peter, it's been really amazing having him as my friend. I can tell you a whole lot of stories about Peter. So Peter and I took these kids for ice cream. Peter works out at the ice cream shop. That these kids got the little free gift, and they were so excited. And as we're walking, they're from Syria, so they don't typically get to go to the nicer areas. And so we took them, and they were like, can we walk through the mall? We've never been through the mall. So, yes, we'll go through the mall. And you should have seen their eyes are just like all in amazement of the mall. And then we took them to the ice cream shop, let them pick their ice cream. And typically the thing was for one scoop, but I was like, that's fine, I'm going to pay and we'll get them two. They can have all the extra scoops. Oh, can I take one to my brother? Yes. And they loved it. They had all this ice cream. And this is a day we used to baptize people in the Mediterranean Sea, which we all loved it. We loved it. But now we have a pool, and this was the day we were getting ready to baptize. The two guys that we ended up baptizing this day were previous Muslims. One was from Pakistan, and one is from Lebanon. So it was an amazing day to see this. And so, yeah, we got a pool now. And so part of me as a deacon is to organize things for the church. So when we have events, I organize them. We are just kind of like y'all. As Trevor was saying, we have lots of women events. And so I get to organize lots of women events, which actually, you know what's amazing to me? I think is beautiful. I sit there, I remember the last time I organized, and they got there early, and I sat there and watched them praying over their event, and I took pictures. I was like, it's beautiful. I see them gather together to pray. They do small groups. They have Bible studies. Sometimes they'll plan a breakfast, and it's beautiful. Now, the men we get to meet every other week. They have a weekly Bible study. We have a every other weekly Bible study, which is fantastic. And guess what? I get to organize that as well. I get to set it up, everything. I get to have my hands involved in almost every ministry because they have me setting up for everything. I go and I have to remove the chairs. I put out tables. I do all of this. So I work there in the morning, from morning till evening, doing cleanup and set up for the church events. I can pray for the people, pray over our church. And sometimes I'm there alone, sometimes I'm not. A lot of times we have people walking by the church that come in. Actually, almost daily, we have people coming into our church. Whether it's church members coming in or, yeah, just different things. Many people. So this is another event. You can see me in my Alabama hoodie. This is another thing I get to do. I get to train people as part of the ministry that I have. I used to do more evangelism when I was able to walk the streets, but when I come on the staff of the church, and there was a huge need for the church. We don't have a lot of people that had the time that was available to do all the organizing, to do all of this. So I told the pastor, I said, anything the church needs me to do, I will try to make myself available. And so that's because of that is when they decided to make me deacon. And so one of my passions is like when I was in the Emirates was coaching CrossFit. And so the guy beside me, he is from Iraq, but he will not say Iraq. He will say Kurdistan. He's Kurdish. And so Kurdistan, this part of Iraq, actually has their own laws. They have their own Kurdish laws. And the lady behind him is British. The one in front, sitting on the box in the middle, is Armenian Lebanese. The one behind is Lebanese, Filipino, Lebanese. So the one behind the guy on the box, he was previously Hezbollah. His family were Hezbollah. And now he's come to know the Lord. We have maybe 3 or 4 people, maybe I'm not sure how many, that were previous Hezbollah that have come to know the Lord. I met one guy, and I asked him, he's like, I said, I'd love to hear your testimony someday. He's like, well, I can just tell you I used to be a Hezbollah fighter. And I was like, whoa. And I asked another one, I was like, do you know how to make a bomb? He's like, yes. And he's like, they learned these as kids, like when They learned it like like here you send your kids to church camp, they send their kids to camp. They learned how to make bombs as children. He knows how to fire a gun very well. And I was like, wow. And the other guy that I was telling you that told me he was the Hezbollah fighter, when he became a believer, he also played soccer. They don't call it soccer, they call it football. He played football. And so he was attacked by his team. That's really sad. And then he ended up leaving. Now he's living closer to Beirut. He was from southern Lebanon. He was from, I don't know if you know much about Lebanon, but a lot of the Bible occurrences are in Lebanon. Tyre, Sidon, the cedars of Lebanon. Lebanon is mentioned all throughout the Bible. Canaan is like a split area. There's Canaan in the two countries. So it's a split. So both claim this is where Jesus performed the first miracle. And so nobody knows for sure. But I've never been to the country below, but I've only stayed in Lebanon. And so I've never been to your country. Maybe someday, inshallah. Inshallah means if God wills. And so, but it doesn't bother me to go or not go. I love where God has me. I love investing in the people there. And this is definitely great. And I'm like, God, how can I use this? Because now it is a ministry. The other was a ministry, but this is also a ministry. I said, how can I use this to glorify you? And I'm sitting there, I remember walking, and I was like, God just gave me this, like an idea. And I was like, oh, wow, that's amazing. I never thought of this before. So in CrossFit, I don't know if anybody are familiar with CrossFit. They do workouts. And mostly all the workouts are based on fallen soldiers. Like Murph is a powerful workout to where you run a mile, you come back, you do 100 pull-ups, you do 200 sit-ups, you do, is it sit-ups? Then you do 300 air squats, and then you run one more mile. Running 1 mile after doing 300 air squats, that's a lot of squats. And my legs were very hurting. But anyway, the thing that God gave me, you can make your workouts based on people who have died for Christ. And so my first workout was Stephen, based on the first martyr, Stephen in the Bible. And so I planned all the exercises around the numbers of the exercise will be based on the person. And this is also part of a City Fit event. This is on a Saturday, instead of a workout, we did a hike. And as you can tell, the hike draws in more people than the exercising parts. Yeah, there's a lot of people that come to the hikes, which is beautiful. You will see the most beautiful countrysides in some of the world, really. It's fantastic. Is that? Okay, so this one is a picture of me with the two guys in behind are my roommates, which John is the one behind. That's Peter on the half face. Then you got John and Dilavan, the one that I said that was from Kurdistan. That's him, Iraq, behind wearing the cap. And so John is also my roommate. And this is also part of another ministry that I have. The church had approached me and asked me to give up my apartment. And we were going to start another apartment with me living with these two guys. Both of these guys were previous Muslims. And so I've been living with them now over a year. And it's been a blessing, such a blessing. Not always, They don't always do their dishes the way I would like. But still, I love them. Love them so much. I can't describe. At first, it took me a while because I was so used to living alone. And so now it's like I'm having to get used to people not cleaning up after themselves. I don't know if John's ever cleaned a house. Ever. Dilavan maybe once. It's usually me. I'm usually the one that cleans. But yeah, it's been a blessing. And I told you about this next guy earlier. This is Abed. Remember I told you I met a guy that when I first moved there, and I would go and walk an hour just to hang out with him till 2 in the morning. This is Abed. Abed came to know the Lord. What a huge praise. Who would have thought sharing the gospel and speaking with somebody through Google Translate could have an impact? But I knew it's always hard and tricky. So I started inviting Ovid to come and be around my Christian friends. And so he never came to church. But then when the bookstore, I started volunteering. I took him there. And then they got to share the gospel with him. And then we went back. And then he shared an amazing story. And me, I didn't care what was being said. They're all speaking in Arabic. I only know so little. So when they speak in conversations, I usually just tune it out. I don't understand. And then the lady that ran the store, she's like, do you want me to tell you what he's talking about? I said, it's fine. Y'all can just talk. I'm fine. Because I know the people that run the bookstore. They are sharing the gospel. Everything was so Christ-centered. Every day when I worked at the bookstore, I shared the gospel. We always offered a free Bible, and you share the gospel. So I was used to this. So I knew what they were doing. But she started telling me. Anyway, she said when he lived in Syria, his view of Christians is that he hated them. He thought Christians did all the bad stuff around the world. So he hated Christians until he met you. She said, as you kept coming into his store every night for over a year, he was watching how you lived your life. And he realized that you were not like what he thought Christians were. And then he had told her that he was thinking about becoming a Christian himself. And so, but he was waiting to see, because he didn't know how. He knew the possibilities. When you share the gospel with Muslims in some of these countries, you have to realize, is it worth it for you to share the gospel knowing that their family may take their life? Is it worth it for you sharing the gospel knowing that they may have to be on the run from their family for trying to take their life? And so he knew the effects that it could have. He said, I will lose my family if I become a Christian. And so about 2 weeks later, after that conversation, he messaged me. He eventually became my roommate. He started living with me, and I had moved in with a different friend after the explosion. When I came back and I didn't have an apartment, I had to find another place to live. So me and a friend moved in together from the church. And then we had an extra bedroom, and he moved in with us, which was great because them two hit it off because they could speak Arabic to each other. And they had met before, but the Lebanese friend didn't want to really have anything to do with the Syrian friend. But now it's amazing how God moves. They became inseparable. They became like the best friends, and I loved it. I loved watching how God moved. And so he had messaged me. He's like, I've made up my mind. But he didn't make up his mind. God made up his mind that he would become a believer. And he did. He said, I've decided to give my life to Christ. And I was like, I can't believe this. This is amazing. He was my best friend. My best friend, the first friend I had in the country. And now he's living in Dubai. Things got so bad with work there, he couldn't even hardly live. He had no money, so he had to move. He moved to Dubai. I think I probably took up your whole church service, George. Sorry for taking all your time. My heart's there now. And so, I'm still seeing God move. I'm still seeing God change lives. Our church is still growing with people that are coming to faith, people that are coming to know Jesus. And it's amazing. During the war, when we're in a war now, I don't know if y'all know this. You probably have heard about the explosions. I was getting ready to train people, and one of my teenagers that's coming in, he's from a Hezbollah family. And he come in, and then right as soon as he's walking through the door, we hear a but it lasts for like 10 seconds. And you just sit there and you feel it shaking. You can feel the vibrations through the air. And that was the day they killed Hassan Nasrallah. He was the leader of Hezbollah. And I remember watching this lady. We have a 67-year-old lady coming for workouts. And she's the most excited anytime I show new exercises. 67. And she came down the road towards the church, and she was just shaking. She's like, I should go home. I should go home. And we're like, just calm down. We sat there and we tried to get her to calm down and all of this stuff. And she stayed. And then after a good few many minutes, we went ahead and did our workout because it became something that was good for our mentality because of all the stuff that just happened. It became good, a way of us, because that's our way of fellowshipping. We get together, we work out together, we talk, we have a good time. And it was a great way for us. And it's been a blessing. I wish you could see her. 67, the things she can do. Yeah, she's like, I got boxes. They got a small box. She's like, I'm going to get to where I can do a box jump. Okay. And she does right now, she does like the one step ups on the box. But she's wanting to get to where she does a box. The big kettlebells, she grabs them. She starts slinging them kettlebells. It's amazing. So amazing to see how God is moving. And she has actually started attending our church as well. So you're seeing the effects of different ministries around our church. The women's, I can't tell y'all what God is doing in our women's ministry. It's beautiful. We don't have that many women coming to our church. But the last event, there was like, they were thinking maybe 30 people would come. We put out tables for 40, then close to 50 to 60 people showed up. So people are inviting other women. Women from other churches are flocking to our different events that we're having. It's a beautiful thing. It's a beautiful thing. So that's kind of my life. Every day in Lebanon. I'm usually up early in the morning. I go to church, work at the church till the afternoon. I get a couple hours break, and I'm coming back to the church, and I'm coaching. Then I have one day off a week. My only day off is Thursday. So usually they don't even message me on Thursday to do stuff for the church. Unless it's just an emergency of an event that somebody's coming that we have to be there for. And then I'm like, that's fine. I mean, my service is to the Lord. Everything I want to do is for the Lord. And God has really worked in my brain to receive every task they give me well. I think our church should be a light, should be a testimony. I got a message from a Muslim neighbor. She's like, now that you're gone, the light's just not at the church anymore. And I was like, wow, what an encouraging word to hear from a Muslim girl. Every day I see her, like when you saw the door of the church, across the street from that, which is about where George is a building. And up that building on the first floor is her apartment. And they come out on the balcony, her father, mother, and all them. And I just yell up to them, hey, Adil! And I just wave at her. And they got a little girl. Her name is Rayon, which is funny because my last name is Ray. I think it's amazing. Her name is Rayon. And she's like, Habibi, Habibi. And Habibi means my love. That's what she used to call me. Now she calls me Randall. She calls me, Randall, Habibi. I got little messages on my phone they're sending to me from her. I got them like 2 days ago when I was in Ohio. Habibi. And so for a girl, I call her Habibti, Habibti. And so it's beautiful. I love this family. But I'm hoping to see them come to know the Lord. I really love that. Hadil actually comes to our church some. She comes wearing her cover, which is fine. We actually have another guy, his wife comes. He became a Christian, but his wife is not. And so she comes to church with him sometimes, and she still wears her cover. Now, she's like, okay, I'm no longer a Muslim, but I'm no longer a Christian. I mean, not no longer, but I'm still not a Christian. So, but now things are starting to change. She's like, I think they're expected, like she said that she's probably going to give her life to the Lord but I'm like, I just know it's God that draws all people to himself through the Holy Spirit. So you definitely see the power of the Spirit working in her, in Hadil, to show up at church. I remember her WhatsApp post. I'm sure she had to make it private because I'm sure she didn't want her Muslim friends seeing all of that she said, because she was like, I went to a church for the first time. And she's like, and it was amazing. The people were so nice. And I was like, wow, what a testimony of our church that she just wrote. It was beautiful. And this is our neighbor. And so, yeah, we're seeing God move in amazing ways. So, but you know what? This cannot be done without you. You have been praying for me. You've been praying for Beirut, Lebanon. And this is showing the power of the Holy Spirit, how God, you tapping into the Spirit can affect what's happening in another country. It is because of your prayers and the prayers of all the people around the world that is making this change. We're seeing a huge change. I could tell you, I've probably met well over 100 people, Muslims, that have given their life to the Lord. Well over 100. I was amazed. I went to an event, and almost every one of them told me they were previous Muslims. My roommates, all of my roommates that I've had have been previous Muslims. Even the one I told you I moved out when the explosion, he was a Muslim. He was also a Hezbollah Muslim before his family. So, well, thank you for this time of listening to my testimony. If you don't mind, I would like to pray for you, and I'll hand it back over to George. Father, I'm so thankful for Christ and how he connects us together. Lord, we're thankful for your Holy Spirit and seeing your work done through him. How they can pray to you and your Holy Spirit moves in their prayers and responds on the other side of the world. Lord, I thank you for these people that are partners in seeing you be glorified in Beirut, Lebanon. Lord, I do pray for this war to cease that's happening there. I pray for peace to prevail. But Lord, we know that the only way this will happen is for Christ to be glorified, for lives and hearts to be changed. Because as long as people respond in fleshly hearts, all we will see is fleshly actions and those that are evil. For anything apart from you is against you. And so, Lord, we need people's hearts to be changed. We need the country below, Palestine, Israel. We need the country above, Syria. We need Lebanon. We need hearts to be changed. And Lord, I pray from these countries, your gospel will go out, Lord, that it will change a world. Lord, from the prayers that from this room that come and affect Lebanon, Lord, I pray that you will also use this church to make an impact here in Fayetteville, in Georgia. And from the effects of this, Lord, that it will spring up and cause a revival in America. Lord, that this church will see the fruits of their labor, Lord, and it will spark a revival in Fayetteville, that it will spark revival in Georgia, that we will see people coming to know you, and that Christ will be exalted. Lord, thank you. I thank you for George's friendship. I thank you that he has been a faithful friend for all these years, and I pray you continue to bless him with wisdom and knowledge as a pastor and how to handle the church, how to in preparing for sermons, and Lord, that your Holy Spirit will work and do amazing things through him. So Lord, bless him and everybody that helps at the church and on staff at this church. Bless them all, Lord, with supernatural power from your Holy Spirit. And we ask this in the name of Christ. Amen.
Thank you for listening. To learn more about us, please visit our website at newvisionc.com and our socials at New Vision Church and NVC Next Gen. Just look for the round broken V logo and we'll see you soon. God bless.